Hello, everyone. My name is Mariana, and I'm an educator at the Natural History Museum of Utah. And this week, I'm leading our question and answer session and our research classes. So today, we have a really special guest, a guest scientist from our museum. Her name is Christy Bills, and she's going to be answering some questions today. She's our entomology and malacology collections manager at the Natural History Museum of Utah. Hi, Christy. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. So we are really excited to have you here today to our special interview. Thank you so much. And we are going to start, I think, like maybe asking like if you can explain a little bit more about like entomology and malacology for maybe some students who don't like know a lot of those terms.
So entomology is the study of insects. And insects are things with 6 legs and 2 antennae and 4 wings. So that includes all the really cool things on Earth, like dragonflies and butterflies and bees and ants and beetles and flies. And but we also sometimes study spiders, even though they're not insects, they're arachnids. And malacology is we have a big shell collection, and we also have a leech collection, which are a totally different phylum, but we also have leeches.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I was wondering if you can explain a little bit about like the collections manager work, like what do you do like with these 2 collections, and maybe like how big is this collection for the Natural History Museum?
Yeah, so the collection is a smaller collection. It's not like the Smithsonian. It doesn't have tens of millions of specimens. It has, we have about 300,000 insects and about 50,000 shells. But the collection is unique that it's mostly things from Utah, but not entirely. We have things from all over the world. And the specimens date back to the 1800s. So we have specimens from the 1800s, 1920s, 1940s, 1960s, like all through history. So each of those specimens is a unique library of information, each bug. So it's the collection manager's job to hold those in trust for the people of Utah and the people of the world, for researchers, for history, so that it's kept in the very best condition so that researchers continue to study them. So when those bugs were collected in the 1800s and the 1910s, we didn't know what kind of data we could extract from them at the time they were collected. But now we have more techniques for understanding more about each bug. And if I hold this bug in 2020, in 2120, what more information will they be able to get from it? We don't know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for everybody who's watching, if you want to leave a question for Christy, just press the ask a question button or leave a comment on Facebook because you're getting all of your questions. And don't be shy and ask some questions. So let's continue with some questions that we got. We got a question from Arabella in Santa Monica, California. She's asking, do you catch bugs and dissect them? And she's also asking, what are different ways people catch bugs? So yeah, if you want to like maybe answer like the first one.
So there's actually so many different kinds of entomologists. There's a really large entomology conference once a year, and it attracts thousands of different people because there's so many different kinds of people who study entomology. And I'm not an entomology physiologist. I don't study the inside workings of bugs. And that's a special field. So I don't dissect many bugs. I could, but I don't. And so that's a special field. And if you're interested in the way insect bodies work, then you would study a very special route. You would take different kinds of classes and you would specialize in that. So I don't dissect bugs, but you can. I mean, feel free, and you can draw your own, make your own drawings, and you can make a study of it. But how to catch bugs, you probably know how in some ways. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. I do catch bugs. My favorite technique is called aerial net, and you probably know what that means. You have a long handle and a net at the end, and you sweep through the air. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. But another way to do it is something called a pitfall trap, which is you just dig a hole in the ground and you put a container, and I have one of these containers. So it's not very high tech. It's just any kind of container from maybe your kitchen that's about this size. And you put this so that this is level to the ground. So a bug walking along would fall in and not be able to get out. And sometimes we put a piece of wood propped over the container so that rain or debris doesn't fall in. So it would just be propped on rocks or sticks, or sometimes nails go in these holes. And then you come back the next day and see what's fallen in your trap. So that's a pitfall trap. But there's other ways. There's different kinds of lights that you put up and bugs come to the light. Or there's beet netting where you have a shrub and you whack it and you have something like an umbrella that you put under the shrub and you see what lands in your umbrella type trap.
There are many ways that this person could like catch some bugs to study them. That's really cool. Thank you. Yeah. So I have another question. Mary from Utah is asking, how do you preserve insects, and she has a specific question about like, how do you preserve a leech?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So insect collections have, so we have our bones on the inside, and bugs kind of have their bones on the outside, meaning they have a hard exoskeleton. So they're just, we just pin them. All their soft parts dry out on the inside. So you don't really have to do a lot to preserve insects. You just pin them. And oftentimes when they're soft, we position them in certain ways so that you can see like their antenna or their legs or their wings. Usually when you see a pinned butterfly, they're very symmetric. And so they've been manipulated when their wings are soft. And then that's it. Once they're dried in the pinned position, you have to protect them from light damage, because too much light will degrade them. You have to protect them from pests, because beetles will eat them, and mice. And you have to protect them from temperature changes. So you don't want them to have direct light. You don't want them to be hot and cold all the time. So in the museum, we monitor very carefully to make sure they have a constant temperature that's not rising and falling, a consistent humidity, and they're protected from light. But other ways insects and other biological specimens are kept is in alcohol. So things that are really soft or very small, like ants or worms or caterpillars or leeches, are kept in alcohol. And it's not rubbing alcohol like you have in your house. It's a different type of alcohol. And we keep them in jars and we label them, and we have to check the alcohol because it evaporates over time. So it's a little bit more work. And then that preserves the tissue so that it can be studied later. And that's especially helpful for sometimes larger animals, because you can open them up and take out their organs, and they stay kind of in the same container with the alcohol.
Oh God, so it's under like an alcohol that like someone could get at home to preserve something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite the same. Yeah, it's called ethyl alcohol.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question from Luke from Colorado. He's asking, what's your favorite or the weirdest thing in the collection? Or maybe like if you have one favorite and one weird.
Gosh, I always think people are so much weirder than bugs. People always surprise me with their weirdness, and bugs never do. I mean, well, bugs do surprise me. In fact, so I've been doing this for like over 20 years, and bugs often surprise me with how strange they are, but I'm surprised constantly. So it's not bugs in my collection. It's talking to other scientists who study bugs. And then I learn new things about them, because there are rules for bugs, that they have 2 antennae, that they have 6 legs, that they have, eyes. And then I'll find out about something that breaks the rules, and I'll think, that's just not how it's supposed to work. So recently, I'll tell you an example. I learned on Twitter, which is a great way for scientists to connect with other scientists. I learned about a beetle, I want to say it's in Brazil, that has antennae that have venom on the tips of the antenna. And it just was slightly upsetting to me, because I thought, I've never heard of that. Antenna used as a venom, with venom that pokes, it's just blew my mind. So that's not something we have in our collection, but it's an exciting thing about entomology that we learn new things all the time, and they're rule breakers all the time. It's really fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. And but you don't have a favorite one from the collections?
No, I never do, because I fall in love with the bugs over and over and over again. It's one day it's giant carpenter bees from Jakarta, and then another day it's little tiny wasps that are so surprising from Galls, and then another day it's sweet little baby tarantulas that, you know, were next to the museum. And you know, it's something different every day. Mostly I love the things that we find locally, because I have a relationship with them and I know how they behave in the wild. So it's things that I know that are familiar to me.
Yeah, like the things that your kids can also find, like in your, like kids from Utah can also find, like maybe in their backyards or something like it. Awesome. I have a question from Florida. Mark is asking, can you tell us a fun story from your work in the field, or have you ever been like bitten, or what's the worst bug bite?
Yeah, and this is another thing about things being super surprising. So people usually think about bee stings or spider bites, and spiders actually rarely bite, and bee stings are usually quite easy to avoid. But one time I was at a conference with some other scientists, and we were at a black light in Tucson, meaning it's at night and we're using a special type of light to attract bugs. And so we have a white sheet that's hung up, and we're all standing around watching bugs come, and mostly moths and the same kinds of things, little teeny tiny flies. And then something came to the light and it moved differently. And I knew it was unique. So I grabbed it, and it didn't occur to me that it could be a wasp or something that could sting me. So I grabbed it with my bare hand, and I got, you know, stung or bit so hard, I immediately dropped it. And what it was not a bee, and it wasn't a wasp. So this is, it was a true bug. So assassin bugs are true bugs, and true bugs are like box elder bugs, and they only have a beak. So if you look at a true bug, like a box elder bug, they have a little straw that lays against their underside of their mouth, and it pokes out like this, and they usually use it for drawing out plant juice. Few of them, like assassin bugs, will use it to poke other insects, to suck them, but some of them will poke people, but not very often, unless you're at a black light and you pick one up. And my thumb swelled up maybe 3 times its size. And this was about 10 years ago, and I still have a scar from that bug. Yeah, I still have the scar. So I've caught like plenty of tarantulas, plenty of wasps. I've never been stung by a wasp. Well, I have at my house. Yeah, it was bigger than that.
Okay.
Of course, it was dark, but that's really great because you can see exactly its mouth part, that it looks like its beak. It's called a beak.
Yeah. Wow. And this left like a scar. Wow.
Yeah, I still have it. If you probably wouldn't be able to see it very well, but it's right there on my thumb, and it was like 10 years ago. It's so crazy. Wow. Yeah.
And like it's a curiosity, like how do you treat like when like you have like some type of like a sting, like something like a bite like that? What do you, how do you treat it? Like,
well, ice. Okay. But everybody's body's different. So if you have a bad reaction, you maybe should see a doctor. Unfortunately, I was like in a small rural town and didn't know what to do. So
yeah, I'm glad it was not like something that you had to see a doctor, but like, yeah, that must hurt so much.
It was bad. I thought my thumb was going to explode. It was just so huge.
Oh no.
But surprising.
Yeah, but did you catch it like later? Like, could you? No. Oh.
No, the bug won.
Oh no. totally points for the bug. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have another question. Christine in Salt Lake City is asking, what are some insects I can find in my backyard? Oh, she's saying she's living in Salt Lake City specifically. So like,
so in Salt Lake right now, it's raining. So all the bugs are hiding. except for worms, which are not insects, but the worms come out because they can breathe well, and their holes are filling up with water, so they're kind of coming out. But the most common things you see in backyards and under rocks in Salt Lake are little black millipedes, a couple different varieties of centipedes. Centipedes are fast moving predators, so they move quick. There's a spider that has sort of a beige abdomen and a red front part, and they don't bite people, but they look fierce, and they eat potato bugs. I call them potato bugs. They're also called sow bugs or pill bugs or roly-polies, and obviously you can find a ton of roly-polies. Roly-polies are so great. They're actually not insects. They're crustaceans. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk about them for just a minute. They
for sure.
They live in family groups. They give birth to live young. They don't lay eggs. And when they live in their family groups, the young help clean up the little home. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. Yeah. So they're really easy to keep in a container too. If you have them and you have like a pine cone and a little bit of carrot and some oak leaves, they like, yeah. Oh my gosh. They're the cutest to keep. They like to live together. So you keep in a few inches of damp soil. They don't like it super dry. And you can watch them grow and have new babies. And when they are healthy and they molt, they leave behind these little white fingernails of their shed. And so you can see them grow, and they'll live for 3 or 4 years. So each one, if you take good care of it, and they'll just be happy eating carrot and dried leaves, and they like a pine cone in there. So yeah, big fan. Okay, what else you could see in your backyard? There's some butterflies flying around. There's different kinds of bees, a lot of bees going on. Not just the honey bee, but different varieties. I've seen some bumblebees out right now. Those are super fun to watch on the different things that are blooming. What else? Earwigs, those are interesting. What's missing in my yard? I don't think mantises are really very prominent yet. A good resource to check though is iNaturalist to see what things have been seen in your area recently.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I have a really good question from California. Karen is asking, why did you choose to study insects? Like what made you want to go to this study?
I think insects are the most fascinating thing ever. I can't believe everybody doesn't study entomology. Honestly, I think it's wildly interesting, but when I was younger, I also thought about this. Insects are our major competitors on the planet for food. So I don't study entomology in agriculture. That's a special field, but it's so important that somebody is studying agricultural entomology, because as we evolve new techniques to keep insects at bay, not eating our food, they are also evolving to continue to eat our food. So the people who are doing that are keeping us fed, because otherwise the insects would be eating all of our crops. They also kill many people every year because mosquito-borne diseases. It's such a critical issue for developing countries with insect-borne diseases, and that's not a problem in the United States. So if you get a mosquito bite in the US, you're not likely to get a disease. I don't want to worry people here. But in other countries, it is a major, major issue. And I'm so glad that there are people who are studying insect-borne diseases, because it's critical for people. They're also just endlessly fascinating. They're all around us all the time. Wherever you are, there's a bug within 10 or 12 feet of you. And they're lovely. And there's so much about our own humanity that we can understand in the way that we react to them. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this all day.
I love it.
But they're beautiful too. They come in every color and every shape. And when it all, people can be weird and bugs can be always beautiful. So I love bugs.
That's awesome. So you have always liked them, like always.
Yeah, I always did. But when you're little, you don't think you can make it a job, but you can.
You can.
You
That,
can.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I want to just remind everyone who's watching, like, if you want to ask a question, please press the ask a question button in our like research questlive.org website, or like leave a comment on Facebook. So I have a question from Cynthia in Midvale. She says, I teach the 4th grade habitat science rotation. Cool facts always interest the students. So what is the most unique bug from Utah? And are there any poisonous bugs that people should be cautious of here, like here in Utah?
Yeah. Oh, well, Cynthia, thank you for your service to the community. Gosh, there's so many great weird bugs. I'll tell you some things about bugs that I love here in Utah. Our tarantulas, which are not dangerous, are very slow growing, and the females live about 25 years and they never leave the burrow. So once the female establishes herself in a burrow, if it's not disrupted, she'll just stay there. And they'll do something where they just come up to the hole of the mouth of their burrow and wait to see if some food comes by. And if it doesn't, she'll just stay in her hole. So they're very risk averse. They just stay in their hole. And when the males become mature, they're about 10 years old, which is really old for a bug. When he becomes mature, he'll start roaming around. And those are the tarantulas that we see in early autumn. And he'll start looking for females in their burrows, do a tapping dance, and lure her. If she likes it, she'll come up to the mouth of the burrow, and they'll either mate at the mouth of the burrow or go down into the burrow to mate. So they're very long-lived and completely harmless, but they have to be very careful because they're not fast runners. They're not very dangerous, and they're preyed on by small mammals and by wasps. Oh, so cute, like little kitty cats.
Look at
Yeah,
it.
they're so fun to find. So if you see a male roaming around when you're out hiking or whatever, just know he's like looking for one thing. He's got business on his mind. Leave him alone. And he's going to die at the end of that season. So they usually just, die at that winter. So that's one really cool bug. Another really cool, unique bug in Utah are velvet ants. So we have many species of velvet ants. They are wingless wasps. So the males have wings and the females don't. And the females walk around being very bright colored in the desert. They're super fuzzy, and they can be red or ochre color or orange, or we even have a white one called a thistledown velvet ant. And she stings, and she has a prehensile stinger. So most wasps or bees will sting. But the velvet ant they know what they're doing. Their stinger can look for something. And they also have the longest stinger per body size. So they're impressive. They also have a super, super hard exoskeleton. So it's very hard for anything to eat them. And they make a noise. Oh, that's one of them. Oh my gosh, they're so cute.
So beautiful color.
Yeah, so many different colors. But if you saw that crawling on the desert floor, now that's a male with wings.
Oh.
They're pretty conspicuous. They have no predators. Nothing wants to eat them. They also make this adorable fairy type noise. I call it a fairy noise because I love to keep them as pets. Not the males because they fly, but the females. They'll eat a little bit of sugar water, and they make this noise when they're caught. If they're pressed a little bit, they go. It's so cute. So velvet ants are amazing. They're super interesting, and they are parasites of digger bees. So we have tons of digger bees in the state of Utah that burrow. They're solitary, and they go right into the ground. That velvet ant mama will crawl along the ground and go into the hole and lay an egg on the digger bees, either their larvae or their eggs, and that's how her babies will grow. And then she'll go about her business. Anyway, super fun, cool, interesting insect. Another cool one we have is a Jerusalem cricket. Jerusalem crickets are nocturnal, solitary, and burrowing. And in the 20 years I've done my job, whenever somebody's called me and said they've seen a really ugly bug, it's been a Jerusalem cricket every single time. Every time. Poor Jerusalem crickets. But people don't see them terribly often because they're solitary, nocturnal, and burrowing. But when you see one, it's so like emotionally disturbing. If you haven't been acquainted with them yet, they're so weird. They have this big smooth head. And I remember the first time I saw one, it was like an unholy experience. But they're just adorable. They're so weird. They're like 2.5 inches long. And yeah, they're hilarious. So now when I encounter them, I immediately take them home and keep them as pets because I know how they behave and I think they're so hilarious. So they can't fly, so they're a wingless bug, and they can't climb the sides of smooth surfaces. So you can put them in a fruit bowl on your counter and they will eat anything, anything. They'll eat cookies and salad and apples and other crickets and hamburger, and they're super grouchy. They're like the grouchiest bug ever, and I love them. So
That's it. And can you see the image that we were sharing? Like, is it the one you're talking about? That's
yeah,
what,
that's
okay,
it.
cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
super great. So that's just 3 of my favorite Utah bugs that are a little bit unusual and have some cool facts about them.
That's awesome. And I was going to just like ask a question so we can have an idea. You said that like the tarantula in Utah can, like the female can live like 25 years. How long does like in other places, like other tarantulas, like from other parts of the world, like how long do they usually live? Do you know? Like, so we have an idea of like, I mean, like
it depends on the species. It really depends. So there's a lot of variety. Other female tarantulas can live a long time. But not that long. I don't know.
No.
It'd be hard for me to say exactly because the species vary a lot over time.
Mhm.
There's 2 kinds of tarantulas. There's terrestrial tarantulas and arboreal tarantulas. So arboreal tarantulas live in trees. Terrestrial tarantulas live in the earth. You know, that makes sense. And we just have terrestrial tarantulas. And this is about as far north as tarantulas go. They go a little bit further north than Salt Lake, but like you won't see them in Idaho, Montana, because it's cold.
Awesome. I think we had other part of the question from our teacher. I think was like, are there any poisonous bugs that people should be cautious of, like Utah, in Utah specifically?
Yeah. So just to be a little bit clear, and I don't mean to be pedantic about this, but poisonous means you shouldn't eat it.
Yeah.
So most bugs are safe to eat if you cook them well. But venomous means the bug can either inject venom into you. And the most venomous bug, or invertebrate that we have in Utah is the black widow. So they're terribly common. Black widows, they're like most insects or spiders either live in your house or out of your house. And black widows are cool living in your basement or living in the desert. They are just like, we'll hang out here, but they're very shy. They're very, very shy. So if you get near one, she will hurry back into her home. She does not want to have anything to do with you. But if you get bit by one, you could get sick. So if you look at the statistics, they kill very, very few people. And in fact, I don't think anybody's died in the United States in many years from a black widow bite. It doesn't mean you necessarily want them in your home. So if you see one, if you catch her and release her in the foothills, you're not hurting her. She'll be fine at the base of a sagebrush. One interesting thing about black widows, so all the females look like this. The males look totally different. They're much smaller. Yeah, that's a totally different species. Yeah,
that one was from Japan, I guess.
Yeah. The males are very small. And if you see an egg sac and you think, I've got a black widow egg sac, my house is going to be filled with black widows, that's not going to happen. So most of the babies that hatch are just going to die. They're just going to desiccate. They're not going to find enough food unless you happen to be like living in a fruit fly factory. There's not going to be enough food for them. So the case with most insects and spiders is, well, that's kind of the way they live. That's how they do things. So they make way more babies than they're ever intending to live. So if you see an egg sac, don't freak out. It's not like all those babies are gonna, and mostly spiders don't create densities of populations. So yeah, a black widow only will bite if she's poked or pressed on. So
Mhm.
people usually get bit because they reach behind something where they can't see, and you know, she gets
Mhm.
scared and it gets pressed.
Mhm.
So one way you can see, you can tell a black widow web though, is that they're very coarse and you can hear them when you run your hand through them. It's safe to do that because she will run away. So if you see a web that's super messy and not uniform, so it's not flat and it doesn't have a pattern, it's just like random, and you run your hand through it and you can almost hear it, it's so rough, that's
Mhm.
often a black widow. But she'll hide from you when you do it. It's not like she's going to come out and be mad about it.
Okay.
But it's important to say that we don't have any brown recluses in Utah.
Mhm.
So people often think we do, and they get nervous about seeing spiders in their house because they think they might be a brown recluse, but we don't have them. So people don't need to worry.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really useful to know, like really important to know about them. And we have a question from Facebook. Tracy, she's asking, could you tell us about the unique beetles that are in coral pink sand dunes?
Yeah, so that's a kind of tiger beetle. So in a place in southern Utah, in about the middle of the state, there's a place called Coral Pink Sand Dunes, and it looks like that. It's so amazing to be there. It's weird. The sand is really soft. And there's a beetle called the Coral Pink Sand Dunes tiger beetle. So it's so cute. It's about an inch long and it's really fast and really fierce. Tiger beetles are amazing. Tiger beetles are fast, and that's why they're called tiger beetles, because they're fast and predatory, and they have jaws that are good. So they're the only beetle that can catch other insects on the wing. So flying around, they can catch another insect in the air. And they also have those long legs because they can hold their bodies off of hot desert sands. And they come in like a lot of different really vibrant colors. So they can be kind of iridescent red or blue or green. They're just one of the prettiest beetles. I've never been able to catch one without a net though. I've never caught a tiger beetle in the coral pink sand dunes though, because they're protected. So I've looked for them there, but I've never tried to catch one because we don't do that. But other tiger beetles I've caught and let go. Oh my gosh, look at that cute face. But you wouldn't want to be a little bug, right?
No.
Getting caught in those jaws. Our tiger beetle collection is so fun to look at because they're just so beautiful. So many different colors.
It looks like it has some hairs. They're like some white like hairs and
little whiskery face. They are really good at living in some pretty harsh environments. So one might find them around the Great Salt Lake, even where there's not very many bugs living. But think of all those flies flying around the Great Salt Lake. It's a bounty for this beetle to fly around. They're often also living in other places that are harsh environments around the United States. So tiger beetles are great. Oh, such a good bug. Now that's my favorite today.
No, that's not it. I'm really liking this color as well. This one that we are showing, this green color is so beautiful.
Yeah.
We have a question from Ilya from Massachusetts. She's asking, have you seen scorpions and have you been stung by one?
I haven't been stung by one, but I have seen them. We have 8 or 9 scorpions in Utah, and you're in Massachusetts. I don't know how many scorpions you have in Massachusetts, though. Probably not many. I think they're more common in the desert. Scorpions are mostly nocturnal, and they're mostly lazy. And that's my favorite fact about scorpions. Well, that's one of my favorite facts. So researchers have learned that most scorpions, and this is not like go write a research paper about this. So do your own research about this. But my understanding is that scorpions spend about 80% of their time doing nothing, just sitting still. Isn't that great?
It's awesome. I love them.
Yeah, they're just chilling. They're just very zen. They're just hanging out, being still. I love it. But another cool fact about scorpions is that some of them are something called parthenogenic. So they just give birth to daughters, and then those daughters have daughters, and there's no males in some scorpions. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Mhm.
I love that they are like constantly relaxing. Like
Yeah, they're just chilling
that's so
out,
cool. That's
relaxing.
awesome. But not sleeping specifically. They're like no, that's
Just
all.
just just relaxing. Yeah. Which means they don't have to get as many calories. They don't have to
Mhm.
search for food. I think they just are like, I'll see if some food comes by, maybe. Mhm.
That seems really smart.
Yeah.
I have a question from St. George. Soren is asking, Jerusalem crickets are cool. How do you take care of one as a pet?
Oh, yeah, so fun. So Jerusalem crickets will bite you if you hold them with your hand. So they don't have venom or anything, but they do have sharp little mandibles. So be a little careful.
Okay.
I just put them, like I said, in a fruit bowl that they can't climb the sides. So make sure the substrate or whatever soil. I buy cocoa peat at the pet store, and then give them a couple inches of that because they like to burrow down. And then they like to take whatever food you give them and bury it, and then it rots. So you have to clean their cage because they're grouchy and messy. And so, but you can feed them anything. I just try to give them a varied diet of like some fruits and veggies and protein. You can feed them like a little bit of tuna, or if you have cat food or dog food, you can give them other bugs to eat. But don't let them sit on your hands. They might bite you. Or you could if you want to see what that's like. I haven't been able to get a pair to breed. It's very hard for me to tell the difference between the males and the females, but you could do your own research on that, and you might find that they prefer certain foods. You might find that you might do some research on it yourself and find out more about it than I know.
That's awesome. And I want to remind everybody who's watching that if you want to leave a question for Christy, please press the ask a question button or leave a comment on Facebook, because we are getting all of your questions. Now, let me see. We have a question from Justice from North Carolina. She's asking, what is your most favorite insect that you have seen? Yeah, that's really special. I know that you don't have a favorite one, but maybe something that you have seen, not necessarily that you like have in the collections.
Yeah, I get excited all the time. Different things excite me. Like just a couple days ago, I caught a bumblebee in my backyard, and she was really big. I think she was a queen bumblebee. So I caught her, and then I put her in a container, and then I put ice around her so she would be slow. And then I took pictures of her for about a half an hour. And she was so beautiful. Oh, she was so beautiful. And then I let her go because I want to have a lot of bumblebees. So she was my favorite that day. You're in North Carolina, so you don't know that in Utah we have not as many fireflies. But in Utah we do have fireflies, and I study them, and I've been finding them for the last 4 or 5 years. And probably whenever I go see fireflies, that's my favorite. It's always really, really magical. But in North Carolina, you have a lot more of them, so it's probably not as unique an experience for you. But when we see them here, it's pretty cool.
Thank you. I have a question from Florida. Jennifer is asking, she's first saying, I love seeing bugs in my backyard. Do they feel the same niches in my backyard that they do in the wild? Oh, that's an interesting question. Like if they are different.
Well, it depends on what you mean by stink bug. So it depends on what you mean. So that's a common name that can mean a couple different things.
Okay.
There's certain types of beetles that are sometimes called stink bugs, and then there are certain types of true, more real bugs, meaning pentatomids, which I don't mean to just use. So they're more shaped like a shield, and they can be green or brown. So it depends on what kind of bug you mean. Your backyard is sort of the wild. So, and it depends on how well it's landscaped, or if it's more wild space. What niche if we're talking about like the stink bugs that are true bugs that are pentatomids, as opposed to beetles that are sometimes called stink bugs, which I don't even know if you have those in Florida. I have one and it's a pet, and I just let it go, and it's crawling around my desk actually. Just
Oh.
maybe about that. What do they feel? Not very many things eat them because they're stinky. And they drink some plant juices with their beak. Again, they have a beak, but they don't usually harm the plant. Or do they? There we go. There's some stink bugs, if that's what we're talking about. There is a stink bug that can be really, really damaging, though, the marmorated stink bug. There's some articles that have been written about it that they're actually a big problem. I'm not really sure how to answer your question, but sometimes they're benign and sometimes they're really bad.
No, I think it's interesting to know that, like you said, like the backyard would be like their wildlife. So that's interesting to know that they would like act in the same way. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have a question from an 8-year-old via Facebook. Her name is Cecily, and she's asking, have you ever identified a bug wrong? Are some bugs harder to figure out what they are than others? Oh, I think she's asking like if you ever like thought there was something and if you were wrong.
Yep. That's pretty much my whole job all the time. It's actually so much harder than you would think. So some bugs, you know for sure. Like if I see a box elder bug, it's just a box elder bug. That's easy. If I see a tarantula in Utah, I know what it is. There's only one species. But there's a lot of things. If I see a bee in Utah, we have something like almost 1,000 different species. So there's a lot of different options. And people who study what species something is, specifically just exactly what that thing is, are called taxonomists. And earlier I talked about people who study the inside of bugs and the way their bodies work. Those are physiologists. And people who study the way bugs relate to each other are called taxonomists. And that's a totally different job. I'm not that great of a taxonomist, so I try and do some of it, but it's actually pretty tricky. And so somebody who might be a taxonomist of just a certain type of bee couldn't really tell you very much about beetles or other groups because they specialize in just that area. So you have to look at very tiny, tiny characteristics. I have somebody in my lab who studies flies, and he looks at the lines on their wings. That's called venation. And he looks at the antenna and their faces, and he looks at different structures on their sides. I have somebody else who's looking at bees, and he has to look really carefully at all their little tiny, tiny structures. And it's like the shapes of their faces again. But the structures are very, very tiny, and you end up looking at a lot of them for a long time. And there's some that we don't know, so things can be complicated. I make mistakes a lot. Yeah, but that's just part of it, you know. It's a fun thing to be in science because you're always learning and things are always changing, and you collaborate with other scientists. And that's one thing that I love a lot about science is that I feel like you're not in competition, you're working together to try and teach as many people as possible and to learn together. So I don't mind being wrong. I always want to learn more, and I want to help people learn.
Yeah, that's awesome. Totally true. I can imagine that is really difficult also to know. And that really connects to another question that we got. Andy from Kansas, he's asking like, what is the best part or the hardest part of being an entomologist? So I think that really connects to what you're talking.
Oh, you know, one of the best parts is that bugs are just endlessly fascinating, and they're around us all the time. And I think people always have an emotional reaction to bugs. So it's a great way to teach people that bugs are important and that they shouldn't be afraid and that they can connect with nature. I like to talk to people about bugs a lot. And bugs are they're great and they're accessible for everyone. So if you know somebody who's 2 or 3 years old, you can play with bugs with them. You know, if you know somebody who's 85 and she can't leave her house, you can read books about poetry about bugs. You know, they're for everyone. Everybody has an emotional reaction to bugs. So bugs belong to everyone and they're everywhere. Maybe not in the Arctic. If you're in the Antarctic, maybe no bugs.
Maybe.
The bugs are for everyone. I like that. But it is hard because it's very humbling. There are some things that you can know everything about, but you can never know everything about entomology. So I think the only wise path with entomology is to always be humble, because you are never going to know everything.
Yeah, you were just talking about like some like the ants like that you just found out that they are from like I think you said they were from Brazil, that you just found out that they have like venom in there, and so like you just learn things all the time. That's so cool.
Yeah. One time I was giving a tour of the collection, and a 10-year-old told me something that he learned on a documentary about moths that I didn't know, and I went and looked it up, and it was true. And I was like, oh, this is just how this goes. You know, there's new things to learn all the time, and it's great, but I never really feel like an expert. So you're always humble.
I think you're an expert, and I think everybody's listening think you are an expert. But it's also fascinating that things are like changing, and that we are always learning new things. So like I think that's really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
We got a really cool question from Tracy from Facebook. She's asking, are there bugs that migrate through Utah?
Yeah, well, not many bugs actually do a true migration, but monarchs do. And painted ladies. So last year we had so many painted lady butterflies. It was really exciting and fun. I don't know if Tracy lives in Salt Lake, but in Utah, we had so many painted lady butterflies. It was really, really beautiful. So that was cool.
Awesome. We have some more questions. This one, they're related to our investigation, to our classes that we are having this week, that Andy is teaching, really awesome classes. First one is, we've been working on an investigation in the Uinta Mountains that looks at the impact of temperature on organisms. How do temperature changes impact on insects? Like climate change?
Well, when they have to move. So in a lot of different ways. So insects are pretty sensitive to temperature change. They're cold-blooded. They're not warm-blooded. They can't generate their own temperature. So they have to be where they can be warm enough to live. But they're very sensitive because they're little, you know. So, and if things get too dry beyond what they can survive, they have to leave. So it's gonna, as the temperatures change, it's gonna cause insects to move their range, which in many ways won't affect people probably, but in some ways it will if disease-causing organisms are able to move into new places.
Yeah.
So another interesting thing is that temperature change can affect the sex ratio of eggs in insects and reptiles, maybe other things. But the temperature can affect how many males and females come out of eggs. So yeah. Isn't that interesting?
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Right? So, yeah. There's so many things that we have yet to understand.
Yeah. And I imagine that like just changing the location, like if they move from the location because of the climate change, like insects, they're related to their ecosystems. So I imagine that causes an impact, like maybe not in the long term, maybe not a short term, but like it's going to cause an impact if they change locations or something like from that ecosystem. So
and a lot of insects are dependent on certain plants, and the plant, you know, a bug can maybe leave, but it's a little bit harder for a plant to leave an area. So especially if it's a tree that takes a long time to grow up to maturity. So some insects are just going to die out. Yeah.
So yeah. Interesting. We have another question related to this same topic. We've been learning about relationship between organisms, symbiotic relationships, competitive or predatory. Do you have a favorite insect relationship with another species? Maybe like related to these types of relationships.
I probably do, but it's hard to think of right now. Let's see.
I know.
Like insect with insects or insects with?
Yeah, I think anything work. I think in another question, when you were giving an example about one of the wasps, I think that one, that really beautiful one with like hairs, I think you said something about, I don't remember if it was that one, but you said that it was like using other insects as well. Like it's, was it like the red one, maybe from the desert? You're also talking about like a relationship of like dependence between other
the velvet ants lay eggs in digger bees. This is okay. Well, I think if I think about this for a long time, I could probably talk about it for hours. One thing that's super cool is that there is a type of butterfly that's a little blue butterfly that lays its eggs in a way that is near certain ants. And then when the caterpillar hatches, the ants will gather the caterpillar up and take it into their home, and the caterpillar will exude like a sweetness so that the ants will feed off of it. And then when it pupates, the ants will carry the butterfly out and it will fly away. So the ants protect the caterpillar, because caterpillars are really vulnerable, right? Because they're little juicy bits of food for birds to eat. But in this way, because it's exuding sweetness like an aphid will, like aphids sometimes have relationships with ants, and then they're protected. Yeah, this cute little lycaenid, it's probably the size of a nickel. It's not very big. And it's really pretty blue on the inside. But the ants will protect the caterpillar. They'll keep it in their home. They'll keep it clean. They'll feed on this sweetness that comes off of it. And then they'll free it as an adult. So that's a really interesting symbiotic relationship.
So cool. That's really, really interesting. I love it.
Thank you for sharing. That happens here in Utah. That I think that they live in near Vernal.
That's really cool.
It's just one relationship. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's an awesome example. I love it. And the image was really, really helpful. That's so cool. We have another question. When we talk about insects being bad, like marmalade, a stink bug, is this bug invasive?
I rarely like to call bugs mean or bad.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't like to think of it that way, but this one is pretty bad. And in that way, I mean to say that it's highly, highly successful. So to be successful biologically, you want to like be good at taking advantage of resources, and you want to make lots of babies. And that's what these things are doing. And they're moving across the United States, east to west, and they are a pest of both agriculture and homes. And they are they can cause a lot of problems. So with a lot of bugs, I'd like to say, just live and let live. You have a few ants, whatever. You have a few box elder bugs, whatever. But these can make your home almost uninhabitable.
Wow.
So, and some ants too can do the same thing. They're really good at doing what they're supposed to do. So I hate to say bad, but some bugs are pretty bad.
Oh. But not because they want you.
They don't want to be bad. They're not they don't hate you. They're not mean.
Yeah.
They're just good at what they do.
Yeah. I have a question. Camden from Salt Lake City is asking, do cicadas live in Utah? And if they don't, why not?
They do. They do. They do. We don't have as much variety of cicadas. They are more numerous, I think, where it's more humid. And they're a little bit bigger back east. but we do have them here. And I've heard them in the foothills around Salt Lake. I've even heard them in urban Salt Lake. There we go. Kind of ugly. You're much more likely to hear them than to see them. So they're not that big, not super huge. So in the late summer, what you'll hear in the trees is different kinds of bugs. So you'll hear like a cricket, which will make like a nice rhythmic chirping. Then you'll hear katydids in the trees, and they are usually higher and they make a nice ticking sound, like tick, 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 tick. And then bees will make like a metallic whirring sound that's really different. It's really loud and very metallic. And there's places on the internet where you can play different insect sounds. When you approach the tree that the cicada is in, they will stop. So they're very, very hard to find. They're very hard to find, which is a good, they're calling to other cicadas for mating. And they don't want you to find them because they think you're a predator. So when you approach the tree, they'll be quiet because they don't want you to be a bird or something else that will eat them.
I can imagine.
So we do have them. And occasionally in the foothills, when we have a big year, you can see all the cicada molts. Like as they come out of the ground and shed their skin on a tree, you'll see hundreds and thousands of molts on the trees. But I haven't seen that for 3 or 4 years, I want to say. So just right time at the right place. See a bunch. But I've seen them. Yeah, we have them.
That's cool. Thank you. I think we have a time for one more question. This one is saying, like, you studied a Salt Lake invasive insect called firebug. How does this impact the ecosystem, and how does it compete with other bugs? And how do you tell if an insect is invasive? I think like maybe more than one question in one, but like related to invasive.
Right. So the firebug, and maybe we can get a picture of that. The firebug has been in Utah, we think, for about 12 years. So it's new. How is it? Is it out competing box elder bugs? We don't know. Is it, nobody's researching that. We know that it has a range extension. We know that it's like growing in where it's, because we've been tracking it. So the work that we've been doing at the museum through the app iNaturalist, we've been tracking as it's been growing in range. But we haven't been tracking, like, has it been displacing other bugs? If it's displacing box elder bugs, does anybody care? Is that a problem? It belongs to a family of bugs called the Pyracoridae, which are known to be cotton stainers. So if we had cotton crops in Utah, people might be more worried because they can be a pest, but we don't. So we have let the Department of Agriculture know that they're here, so they're aware, and nobody seems to be concerned. So some bugs are kind of benign in the environment. They're not going to be bad or good. They're just kind of being there. They don't harm trees. They don't harm plants. They do suck a little bit of juice out of the plants, but they're not hurting it. So they're not seeming to cause a problem.
Yeah, and how do you tell if the insect is invasive? I think it's asking like for like common people.
That's our little box elder bug.
Yay!
Hi, friend. Hi, friend. Look at that cute little triangle head. I love that little triangle head.
Yeah.
And you can see it's a lot different than the firebug, because the firebug has 2 circles and the box elder bug just has the little red outline. Either one's safe to handle. You can pick it up, make a good observation. They're both true bugs because they have a beak, they have incomplete metamorphosis, and their wings make a crossover. So the difference between beetles and bugs, I like to do this with my hands. Beetles' wings meet in a straight line, bugs' wings cross over. Beetle, bug, beetle. Yeah, the crossing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think somebody would have to do their own research. We'd have to have somebody decide to study if they're going to be a problem or not, because we don't know.
Yeah, and I think like resources like iNaturalist can be like really helpful for people if they want to do research about this as well. So like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Chrissy, we are out of time right now with our interview, but I want to thank you so much for participating. That was awesome. I think we learned so much from it. I learned a lot from it. It was
Oh,
so
good.
cool.
It was fun to talk.
Yeah, so thank you so much for participating. That was awesome. And thank you for everybody who's watching today. And don't forget that, and that on Monday we have classes again. So we are going to continue research the winter investigation, and it's going to start at 9:30 Mountain Daylight Time. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome. Thanks for talking to me about bugs.
Thank you. It was awesome. Bye.